started listening to Grateful Dead. You familiar with Grateful Dead?
I've heard a few other songs. I don't know. I think it's one of those things that I probably would have listened to a lot more back when I was smoking weed all the time, and now I don't so much. So I can't smoke weed anymore, unfortunately.
You just don't want to, or you don't really like it as much?
Um, I the thing is, I want to, but so I'm bipolar, and I've been hospitalized a few times from like a manic episode, and it just the last time, I don't know, just every time that it's happened, I've been actively smoking a lot of weed, so I just kind of decided I'm done with it. It's not good for me
Oh,
anymore.
that's interesting.
Yeah,
I actually have schizophrenia, and that stuff started whenever I started smoking marijuana once.
really. Yeah. See, the thing is, I went for like 5 years without it happening. So it was back in 2012 that it happened to me, and it was like fucking catastrophic, like ruined my life. And the same thing happened in 2016. So it was a 4 year time span, and I didn't have any symptoms, like nothing like that. The whole time after I started smoking again, had like a lot of success with different jobs and traveling all around and doing great. And all of a sudden, I just my mind decided to get all fucking wackadoo again, and I had to go to the hospital, and we actually went to jail because I caused a big public scene, and it sucked. So I'm like, I can't do that anymore. And it's just no. I'm completely sober now. I have been for like 2 years. So,
Yeah, I just
or at
recently,
least since that happened. So,
I just
thank
recently,
you.
recently stopped, and yeah, congratulations on that. But I definitely I stopped just a month ago. Like a month ago, I stopped again because I was doing
Yeah,
it. I was doing it like a while ago. Like I stopped for like 2 or 3 years of marijuana, and I had an episode where I smoked either too much or it was just too potent or something, and then I started hearing voices and stuff, and I started hallucinating,
yeah.
and it was pretty bad. And
See,
I still hear voices even without smoking now. So now I have like permanent schizophrenia.
wow, man, it's really wild. Like where I don't know, just my whole experience with bipolar. I really feel like there have been with the manic episodes, there have been portions of the experiences with that have felt like what I've heard schizophrenia described as by various people, like full on hallucinations and dipping in between different realities that my brain is sort of constructing. Like, I, it's hard to describe. Like, I guess, like all of a sudden over the course of a few weeks, like I'll get really excited about a project or something, or I'll get very involved with something and super hyper focused and obsessed with very specific things, and all of a sudden my mind will start like ascribing all these different plots to things that are happening around me, and it becomes like a very paranoid and um, like I don't know, it
Yeah,
it's a very paranoid experience where I think I'm the center of this like conspiracy or something. It's really weird and ends up catastrophically every time. It's not a fun experience.
yeah,
You don't realize it's like a boiled frog kind of thing. Like you don't realize that anything's wrong until it's like very wrong, and then you
yeah,
think you're fine, but then
yeah.
the ambulance is coming to get you, and it fucking sucks.
Right. Because whenever, yeah, it's similar to what you're describing. Because I've gone to counselors and stuff, and I've actually been hospitalized for this stuff too. Like I've gone to
Yeah.
like behavioral health units, if you're familiar with what those are, where it's like
Yep.
you'll be in hospitals for like weeks on end, and it's like,
Yeah. I was in for a month both times.
yeah, I was in for like a week once, and then I was in for another 2 weeks the second time, and
Yeah.
it's just because like there's a lot of I've gone through some traumatic stuff throughout my life, and I've been bullied and stuff like that, and there's been other stuff that have happened. I think a lot of it might have been due to like maybe it boiled over, and maybe some of it's genetic as well. So because I mean,
Yeah.
some people do say that, well, not really people say, but I think it's scientifically proven that people do develop schizophrenia over time, or it like happens at a certain point, like maybe when you're in your mid to late 20s or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. For me, it was like 23 or 24 or something like that. And just switch flipped, and all of a sudden I'm a fucking psycho, like tripping out at my girlfriend's house, causing a scene. And not violent with her or anything, but just like
Right.
just
Yeah.
very belligerent, like I was tripping hard on psychedelics or something.
Right.
Like imagine if somebody just dosed you with fucking psychedelics and you didn't realize what was happening, and everyone else can tell you're fucked up and you
And it
can't.
and it feels like it's that real too. Like there's that many things going on, and you can't really control it inside your head.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's
I mean, the hardest part for me is that the mania feels awesome, like the best drug. Like I don't know, you just feel whatever it's happening to me, I always feel like the best I've ever felt, like unnaturally good, like zero depressive symptoms, and then all of a sudden it's like it just goes completely wrong.
right. I just
It's hard to be open with people about that in regular life too. Like I don't talk to anybody about it aside from like my close family and people who have kind of like experienced it with me or seen my symptoms. But I don't tell new people I meet or strangers about it unless I get very close to them.
right. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm not somebody that even talks about my stuff. I've only talked about stuff like with like counselors and maybe some of my parents and
yeah,
stuff. And my some of my parents don't really understand it. Like they like my mother. I think I got it from my mother's side mostly because
yeah.
she's really bipolar, and you know there was a time where she was under the influence of alcohol, and she
Hmm.
like one of her worst episodes of bipolar was that she went like crazy, like almost like I don't know, and I don't really tell too many people this, but she had a gun and she was like shooting up the house and stuff, and
Whoa, man!
she
Wow.
had like the whole SWAT team outside and everything saying that she was gonna go and kill cops and stuff,
Oh,
and
jeez. She's lucky she's alive.
yeah, and that was probably the craziest episode I've ever seen her have, and that was under the influence of alcohol. But I don't know, she's okay now. She lives in New Philadelphia, which is in Ohio. But
I'm glad to hear she's doing better.
for some reason, she still does get on alcohol. Not as heavily as she used to. She actually moderates herself now.
Yeah,
But she's met a guy, and she's doing better. But she still gets on that.
that's great.
I just don't like it when she gets on alcohol. But if she can moderate it, then I'm
Yeah,
fine. I'm fine with it.
yeah, yeah. And the worst times for me during those episodes has been by far the experience of getting taken into the hospital or like yeah, just like like the induction into the hospital basically. Like so, the first time I got taken in an ambulance and I went willingly. I didn't. Cops showed up. They were taunting me. The thing is, I gotta remember like actual legitimate details of what my surroundings were and how people were actually acting, and I can sort of separate the narrative that I was ascribing to that after the fact. Like I know, looking back on it, what was actually going on versus what I thought at the time was going on. So I can say, oh yeah, this happened, and they were way out of line when they did that. So, anyways, these cops were like taunting me and like making jokes about me, and I didn't, think I was just like whatever. I was sitting on the ground there. These three cops are surrounding me, waiting for the ambulance to get there because my girlfriend's mom had called the cops on me because she could tell she was a nurse. She could tell something was going on, and so I get to the hospital and they put me in the emergency room. They injected me with something. I think it was Zyprexa, if I remember correctly, and I was like, I was listening to a lot of like, Duncan. I don't know if you know who Duncan Trussell is, but I was listening to some like podcast. He goes on about like Buddhist stuff, and I was, ranting about some Buddhist shit or something, and the people that worked there in the ER, I don't know if they were like intake nurses or what, but they were kind of mocking me too, like vocally, and they injected me with this stuff, left the room, turned the lights off, and I must have felt like I was in danger Because the next thing I remember after they injected me with that is waking up with my face being pressed against the floor and people yelling at me to stop resisting. Apparently I was totally nude, had fucking ripped my IV out, tried to leave the hospital, and like 9 people were trying to detain me, and I guess I put one guy in the ER because of whatever I was like not physically violent until they put whatever drug in me that it was at the time, whatever cocktail of drugs. So I like
Holy
shit all
crap,
over this
man.
nurse's shoes. It was fucking crazy, dude. So,
Yeah.
so I spent the next like 2 weeks in their like locked down portion of the hospital. It was called like low sensory input or something like that. It was basically like jail for mentally ill people at the hospital.
Right.
So I'm in there and I was dazed and confused for at least 2 weeks, and then I finally kind of like came out of it, tried to leave the hospital, not really knowing what the fuck was going on. I just like they let me out into like the common area, and I immediately got onto the elevator and tried to leave, like wearing my my gown that they had me in there,
Right.
and I spent the next couple weeks there, still, just kind of in and out of, I guess, reality. That was the first time, and I ended up just kind of leaving that state after that and coming down to where I'm at now. But
Right.
years later, I had moved up to California and done all this stuff, gone up to Alaska, like been all over the place, being totally cool and not on medication. Like held a steady relationships, like held a couple different jobs really well. Like didn't need any kind of medication at the time. And when I got back from Alaska, I was really depressed, and I just kind of sat around for a while. I had money in reserves, but I wasn't really doing anything, and smoking a ton of weed, but I probably shouldn't have been smoking. And yeah, so I slowly over a couple of weeks it like ramped up again until I was at this vineyard with my parents who had come to visit and my girlfriend at the time, and I flipped the fuck out at this vineyard and like had this crazy like delusional paranoid like narrative going on in my head by the time the police showed up. And I was like once again taking my fucking clothes off. I was in my underwear at this vineyard and the police were there, and it was honestly like as embarrassing and catastrophic as it could get. I was like yelling about some shit, and so yeah, the police came. They took me to the jail first, which is like, why would you take me to the jail and not the hospital? Because my mom was there. She knew what was going on. She told them. They took me to the jail, and police beat the shit out of me because I was scared to get out of the cop car. Wasn't violent with them at all. They like beat the shit out of me, put a spit mask on me, like did all kinds of crazy shit where they were bending my arms behind my back and like smacking me. Dude, it was crazy. So yeah, I spent the next couple days in jail, like in just a
Yeah.
stupor,
Yeah.
and woke up a few days later, like in the hospital, and
Man, I was
I
getting
just never want that to happen again. So I'm
I was getting
sorry, go
anxiety
ahead.
just here. I was getting anxiety just hearing some of that
Dude,
stuff.
yeah. So it's only been about the last year. Like I spent about a year in like a deep, like suicidal, like anxious depression where I literally, if I wasn't around my family, I definitely would have killed myself. Like I was thinking about it every day. I had it planned out, and I'm still here now and I'm doing good. So I'm just
Yeah.
gonna leave drugs
I'm
and
definitely.
alcohol alone. Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely pretty good to hear, man. Like the fact that you're sobering up and you definitely don't want that kind of stuff to happen again. When it comes to like mental illness and stuff like that, and I mean yours might be onset based on just having marijuana and stuff. Maybe it's not something that, you know, do you like suffer from bipolar disorder like all the time, or is it just mainly whenever you're doing substances?
It's mostly so when I was smoking weed, I feel like I was the most even over long periods of time. I definitely like feel anxiety a lot more frequently now, and it's hard for me to say because I never really felt the symptoms too much um, of bipolar bef- before the second hospitalization. Like I never, like I never really had ups and downs, and It's just, yeah, it's honestly hard for me to say because now I definitely do feel more anxiety. I do feel, I feel like a different range of emotions, and I feel different in my body than I used to before that second event where I went to jail and everything. So not smoking weed now, it's like the first time, for the last like 1.5, 2 years. It's since I started when I was 18 smoking weed and smoked pretty regularly from that time. So I think a lot of like being sober is just getting used to different emotions and ranges of feelings that you might otherwise be numbing with whatever your drug of choice is.
Yeah, I can definitely I can definitely understand that too. Like whenever, I mean, I've had well, not episodes, but I've gone through periods in my life where it's like, um, and I'm still struggling with alcohol abuse and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
my dad's side, my mother's side, she's kind of had alcohol issues, but I've struggled with it probably for the past, I want to say, I was sober for about 3 or 4 years, and then I started up again. I just started relapsing, and I'm trying to moderate
yeah,
it. But at my worst, there was times where I'd black out and stuff, and I wouldn't even understand
yeah.
it.
I used
And
to do that
yeah,
a lot when I was like younger, like 18 or 19. I would black out. It was like not a depressed blackout, but it was like I'm partying a lot kind of blackout.
all right. Now for me, it was basically all just to get away from stuff. Like it was mostly all
Yeah,
depressive drinking most of the time. And that's probably the worst kind of drinking. Like the party drinking is pretty fun from time to time, and I've had some of those moments too, like where I've drank with friends and stuff. But
yeah,
I mean, when I get like hard liquor in me, like if I'm at my worst, like I could drink an entire fifth or more in a night, you know, of like
wow,
vodka or whatever the heck it is,
yeah,
And I think
yeah. My best friend growing up, his dad had a heart attack last year, and while I was kind of recovering, he called me, and I found out for the first time that he like still drinks really heavily and like has a major drinking problem apparently, where he wrecked two of his cars, and he had two D. It was within a couple months. He had two DUIs, and while I was talking to him on the phone, he like he got progressively more and more drunk, and eventually blacked out to the point where I was like, man, I gotta hang up on him now. He's just like not awake, and it was. I was talking to him, and it's the first experience I've really had where I'm like talking to somebody and I'm like trying to kind of talk through it with them and see like if there's anything I can do to help them. And I was like, man, there's really like no combination of words I can say to my friend here that is gonna make him decide that he should put the bottle down right now. Which was I don't know, it was a weird experience for me. It's hard.
oh yeah, dealing with people who have substance abuse issues and stuff like that can be very walking on eggshells kind of stuff. You never know, especially if they have like really, I don't know if they have different personality disorders or if they have different mental disorders or problems of any kind like that. Then it's like
Yeah,
walking on eggshells for some people. Like I've definitely been around people that um, similar to my mother and stuff like that, where it's like they get really like angry and stuff like that. Um, but it
yeah,
depends. It really depends on their moods. It depends on their environment and all that kind of stuff. Like I've had moments where I've gotten semi-angry, but most of the time I'm pretty chill when I drink. But it's just drinking excessively that really screws me up, and you know,
yeah,
and marijuana and stuff like that. Like I said, marijuana is the thing that got me into that schizophrenic mode. And then like
yeah.
the thing that happened was like, and I'm somebody that's kind of spiritual too, right? You said you were talking about Buddhist stuff,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And I get into stuff. I was starting to get into stuff that was like new agey kind of stuff at one point
yeah, man.
because
Yep.
I watch like Alex Jones and I'd watch like conspiracy videos and stuff all the time online.
Yeah, same here. Same here.
and I was starting to get into like new age stuff, and at one point I was getting into like twin flames, and people, people think that they're like connected spiritually to each other, universally speaking, and all that stuff. Opening up
Yeah,
chakras, and yeah, whenever I was doing that,
sure, yeah,
I created a narrative in my head where I thought I was connected to like celebrities, and I was hearing their voices in my head,
yeah,
and it sounded like their voices were
dude,
literally in my head, and they were like saying stuff
yeah.
like, "Oh, I want to be with you. I want to be with you." And I'm like, "What the hell's going on right now? I don't even know my reality is so bad." And I
And
couldn't.
that's what I'm saying about how I felt like my bipolar symptoms. Like I really think there's an it's a spectrum, like this kind of thing, like bipolar and schizophrenia. There's a spectrum there because I feel like mine, like they didn't diagnose me as like schizoaffective, or I'm not even sure honestly what that means exactly. But I definitely, whenever I hear people talk about schizophrenia, I'm like, man, my episodes are definitely have some of those symptoms because yeah, there's shit like I remember at one point I was in the hospital. It was after jail, but I was sitting there in the hospital and I'm watching fucking TV, and I say something like I'm having a conversation with the person that's on this MTV show, and they're responding to me. It's like I reality becomes so malleable in that headspace, and it's very strange to me. As some like, I want to wonder how much of it, because in the past I have taken psychedelics like LSD and mushrooms, and I'm like, did I
Mhm.
do this to myself, or like was this already there and I opened it, or what's the significance of these things if there's anything? Like, I try not to ascribe too much meaning to anything that I've experienced in those states, but there have been some things that have happened each time where like when I'm dipping into that headspace where I'm like, man, that was very, very real to me. And I was like, I know that I can't put too much weight on it for the purpose of living at like my life and being happy afterward when I'm not in that state of mind. But
Yeah.
like for instance, three different times, uh, two, yeah, it's actually two times. Somebody else told me about the time it happened to them. But two times I've seen somebody's eyes turn jet black. Um, like my nephew is one of them, and my nephew is a diagnosed psychopath, right? Like he's got a mental illness. He's a very manipulative person. Will like steal people's identities subtly. Like he'll start like wearing their clothes eventually and shit. It's very creepy, but he's one of the
Okay.
creepiest people I've ever met. Very manipulative person. So
Right.
I'm smoking weed with him after I get out of the hospital. And granted, I'm on these meds, and it was the first time after I went to the hospital I got out. I'm on Geodon and lithium at the time, and I wanted to smoke the rest of my weed I still had from Michigan. Terrible idea. But I'm smoking with him, and I'm like hanging out with him. This is before I realized kind of like how he had grown up and how he had changed since I had last seen him. And all of a sudden, this like something snapped in the moment where I was like very wary of him and like kind of saw through his mask that he was putting on, so to speak. And my anxiety like spiked through the roof. And I go inside because I'm like, I gotta get away from this dude. Just like he's giving off this terrible vibe, and I'm very good at like feeling people's quote unquote energy, like not physically obviously, but I like picking up on whatever it is that people are putting out. And he just has this like animosity about him. So I'm inside, and I see him walk in, and he has this like Cheshire cat grin on, like comically large, like literally like the Cheshire cat, and his eyes
Right.
are jet black, like dark fucking black, like you read about the black-eyed kids, and
Yeah,
I'm
I've
like,
heard of that
what
stuff.
the fuck? Yeah, so I see that he's like, this is something that's supposed to happen with psychopaths. I had never read that before. Like I had never read that claim that psychopaths' eyes will turn black, like abusive partners and things like that. That people see their eyes turn black. Never read that. I started reading about that and found out that's a thing that people claim, and then scientists will say that's not possible. And I'm like, well, yeah, maybe it's not, but at the same time, maybe there's something about that state of mind that your brain interprets it and like senses danger from that person, and I don't know.
So
Right.
you're
But I've
saying
seen
like a
that
visual
happen twice.
hallucination?
Hmm.
Yeah, it was a visual. It was a visual hallucination, but the
Based
thing
off
is,
their
it's like
vibes, pretty much.
that's the only way that I can rationalize it.
Hmm.
And the thing about hallucinations is like to the person that's experiencing them, it's like that's their reality, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm like, for
Hmm.
me, his eyes just fucking turn black, you know. It's like
Right.
to say it's a hallucination is the only way I guess you can relate it to other people. But I saw the same thing happen with a deputy that was staring me down while I was at the hospital. So
Hmm.
I don't know. It's so hard to like to give any value to those things. They're like, oh, I was in, I was not in my right state of mind when I saw that. Whatever, I was on drugs or whatever it
Yeah.
happened to be when these things happen. But I don't know. It's something that I'll catch going through my head, and I'm like, I just gotta snap out of it and be like, that was fucked up. But it felt like the devil was like
Oh
staring into my
yeah.
soul or something, you know?
Yeah. Exactly.
Like literally like the darkest thing, spookiest like horror movie type thing I've ever seen in my
Yeah.
life. In my reality. But yeah, these things definitely seem real. Like you were saying that you were hearing celebrity voices in your head, and I had a few like weird things like that too when I was in the hospital.
Yep. Yep. And
Strange, man.
the sad part about it is like if like even on the right medications, like I have medications I'm on, like unfortunately I have to actually be on
Yeah,
medications to even mediate
sure.
it because
Hmm.
sometimes it feels like there's like a big like a vice or something pressing my head. There's like a pressure in my
Wow.
head that I can't shake it, and it comes in and goes.
Hmm.
So it's not like a constant thing that I have to like suffer with all the time, but it's still something that sucks. And it's like even with medications and stuff, I still hear stuff, and it's like I can't really get rid of it. And it's like you have to focus your mind on other things. They're just hallucinations, or
Yeah.
they're just this or that, and you can't really focus too much of your energy on that stuff. But yeah,
Right.
I've lost jobs. Even I lost a job because of that stuff, and because it was just getting to a point where I couldn't really focus on
It's
anything, and I
yeah, unmanageable.
talk to myself all the time, and I still have problems with talking to myself. I used to talk to myself as a kid because I was like, oh, I'm a loner, right? I'm a loner.
Yeah.
So it's like I get to a point where it's like I talk to myself. I mean, sometimes it's just I'm trying to assess a situation. And, everybody does talk to themselves from time to time, just, all right, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. I'm going to do this. But, I've gotten to the point where I'm almost talking to myself in like a third person or like somebody's like talking back to me or something. So
Wow.
that's something that I have a problem with too sometimes. And
Yeah.
it can be quite exhausting or exasperating, I should say, just dealing with it.
Oh, sure.
But it's like, but yeah, I mean, it's manageable with medications and stuff and counseling. But um, and then we got people over here with their
Weird that
avatars.
when I was in the hospital.
I can't even hear what you're saying with this
Like
avatar
literally,
going.
like the dark.
Yeah, that avatar screwed me. He just froze my game out. That was a pretty cool conversation, though. I don't know if I'll meet that guy again. I'm friends with him on here, so I can maybe do that. Just froze my game out.